Hey, welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Interdonato. The Black Knight Nation podcast is brought to you by Higher Echelon, a company run by Joe Ross, who's a former Army fullback, former Army assistant coach, former Army officer, and a guest on the Black Knight Nation podcast. We thank Joe Ross for sponsoring the podcast throughout the season, and this is going to be our episode where we recap the 2023 season for Army football. We're also going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal and players who have decided to enter the transfer portal. We're going to talk a little bit about what we can expect for the 2024 season for Army too. So let's get on with it. We have Seth Mendelson here, Black Knight Nation. We have Brendan in Jersey to recap the 2023 season. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining us. And we have a lot of viewers right now, so we want to get your comments and questions. If we talk about something that you want to comment on, please send your comments and questions to us. We will address all the comments and questions on this. We're here for you guys tonight. That's what this is all about. And Seth, welcome. Happy holidays to you, Seth, and happy holidays to you, Brendan.
Same to you, Sal. Happy holiday. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, same to you and same to our audience.
Absolutely. Let's I put up a couple first off, I want to plug something. I talked to Bo Nicholas Paul tonight. Bo Nicholas Paul is going to play in the Tropical Bowl. It's a senior all-star game in Orlando on January 20th. He received an invitation. He accepted it. He's pretty excited about getting another chance to play football, maybe another chance to impress scouts. So Bo Nicholas Paul, I'm going to write that story up as soon as I can. It'll be on the Black Knight Nation website. I do know there's one more Army senior that's been chosen to play in the senior all-star game. I will not reveal that name yet because it has to be made public by the player, but there will be another Army football senior also to play in a senior game. So that's pretty cool. I want to also get to I put up some poll questions today. I really wanted to put them up a little earlier. Had some stuff going on with family and didn't get a chance to put them up as early as I wanted to, but wanted to get Seth and Brendan's opinion on these questions and get the poll also going, see how it went online. First off, I had who was the Army Offensive Player of the Year for the 2023 season. The candidates I had, you only get 4 on these polls. So I had Bryson Daly, Kanye Udo, Tyson Riley, and Brady Small as the 4 offensive players, top offensive players. And the poll, 63%, Bryson Daly got the vote for Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, pretty much if you're talking about production, certainly, and what they meant to the offense when Bryson wasn't in the game, right? When he didn't start at LSU and in the UMass game when he didn't start, it was a little bit of struggle. So, I don't know how you guys feel. I think that's a pretty consensus vote. How do you guys feel about that?
I'll start. I remember back in August when you and I were talking about who the quarterback was going to be at Army, and of course we thought it was going to be Daly, but we weren't sure. We didn't know what was going to happen here with this kid. He wasn't in the games much last year, the previous year. He's a junior. We didn't expect much from him, and I totally agree. I think he was an absolute star for us. And made a dramatic difference when he played. When he wasn't there, as you just said, it was noticeable. And he's a tough kid. Glad to have him back next year, and he's going to lead the offense next year. That's my view. He's got my vote.
Yeah, I mean, there's one player in Army history who has passed for 1,000 yards and rushed for 1,000 yards in the same season, and that was Kelvin Hopkins in 2018. And Bryson came up just short, basically with like 900 and change passing and rushing, and he didn't get the benefit of a standout bowl performance like Kelvin Hopkins did. Yeah, so point. it just goes to show you really like how much of the offense was on his back this season, and ideally in any sort of option offense, you'd maybe like to see him have less of a load on the shoulders, but sometimes circumstances, especially something like the Air Force game where, it was just kind of clear what was working that day. And then they had enough of a lead and the defense was playing well enough that they could just kind of salt the game away. But yeah, I certainly look for him to join Kelvin Hopkins in that club if he starts next year and stays healthy for at least 11 out of however many games they play next year. I will say off the top, I mean we're gonna hold off a bit on talking about 2024, but I guarantee the Black Knights go bowling next year. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. Real quick, let's get a couple comments. First off, I should have started off by saying Army, just to recap the season real quick in a nutshell, started off 2-1, but the season opener lost at Louisiana Monroe, which was a game that they probably should have won. Definitely got to have that game. They went up, they rebounded, they beat UTSA on the road without UTSA's quarterback Frank Harris, but then lost 5 games in a row. Went to 2-6 and then rebounded and won 4 straight. And Walt checking in here saying, what a way for the team to fight back after starting 2-6. So just wanted to give a quick recap of the season. We'll get into like specific parts of the season and those games coming up. A couple other notes. 2 of those guys out of the 4 that I picked were freshmen, Kanye Udo and Brady Small. So that says a lot about the offense and, those guys getting a chance. And, there were some injuries this year, of course, with Isaiah Alston, where he didn't play, only played 4 games. Tyrell Robinson came back, about midway through the season. So his impact wasn't as much as it would have been if he would have played a full season. They really, I just liked it. Kind of moved guys in and out of the backfield a little bit, even though Udo got the bulk of the carries for a good portion of the year. You also saw, shifts with Tyson Riley in there. You also saw Hayden Reed in there at times. Markel Johnson, in my opinion, didn't get as much as a run as maybe he should have. Miles Stewart was in there. They just mixed up a bunch of guys. And, as far as Tyson Riley, I think he was probably one of the most valuable, maybe versatile players on offense when he was able to play the B-back position. He was able to play H-back. He caught 3 touchdown passes. He had that 100-yard game against Coastal Carolina, which was one of the big differences in the win over an 8-win Coastal Carolina team at home. So wanted to throw Tyson Riley in that acknowledgement and recognition too. And, the offensive line, I don't think that we saw the best out of the offensive line. At times it was a pretty experienced group, but in the end, in those last 4 games, they put their stamp on those wins. So that was good to see. And Josh Lingenfelter too. I mean, Josh Lingenfelter was a little bit banged up this year, and he's a guy who's going to get a chance at the next level. Just wanted to give those guys a shout. You guys have anything to add on the offense and maybe specifically individual players, or what you liked about what you saw with individuals? Or
I would say Noah Short had a lot of clutch catches, especially down the stretch. But also, he had a touchdown against UTSA, and he was kind of a standout player in the first part of the season, and then everybody got kind of lost in the morass of that losing streak, but like I said, had definitely had his share of clutch moments during that winning streak down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree with you. Noah Short came out of nowhere and really did come up with some clutch plays. So I was impressed with him too.
That was a benefit of moving to the gun option, moving Noah Short from defense to offense in the spring, and that really, he certainly took advantage of that, and even was still playing special teams too. So valuable player for Army, and only a sophomore, Noah Short. So they're pretty young. You look at the offense and you say, okay, the rushing numbers weren't where they were in the flex bone, right? They weren't as much as where they were in the flex bone. We thought maybe they would be higher. Maybe they score a little bit more points, but certainly for the future, they bring back a lot of experience, a lot of those yards and rushing yards, receptions, all that back. So defensive player of the year on the poll, I had Leo Lowen, Quindraylon Hammonds, Jimmy Charlo, and Caleb Fortner. Leo Lowen, 68% of the poll, of the Twitter X poll, 13% for Fortner, 10% for Charlo, and 9% for Hammonds. There's a lot of options here. If you go strictly by stats and strictly about, what they meant to the defense and, especially performances, right? Leo Lowen against Air Force was out of his mind, right? Out of his mind. Caleb Fortner against Navy, a great game. If you do it by game 1 to game 12, probably Leo Lowen's the pick there. What do you think, Seth?
Well, I think Leo is probably stands out. I agree with. I would vote for him too. But I would say each one of those guys and a couple others stepped up at various points during the season. I thought the Army defense played very well this year, with a couple of mistakes, a couple of some downtime, but overall very well throughout the LSU game. We don't count that game. But I was very impressed with how the defense played, and Jimmy and Leo, they stood out there. Two captains did their jobs, but other people just stepped up at the right time, made key plays, some fumbles, some interceptions, and kept Army in the game. We always talk about it was a 2-6 start, and we finished at 6-6. That was the defense. Those 4 games, that defense played really well. Maybe the Coastal game would give the offense a little bit of a boost there, but we're going to miss those 2 guys, and hopefully somebody will step up and take their place. We had a good defense last year too, and we were worried. I think the defense did great overall.
I would agree. Certainly, certainly again down the stretch, the defense really flexed their muscle, but they were, they were kind of the standout unit for most of the season. But I would agree in terms of defensive MVP, definitely Leo Lowen on the season. Leader in tackles, tied for leader in sacks, and alone with most forced fumbles on the season. Tough to beat that.
Yeah, and so this is pretty senior, like Seth talked about, the captains with Leo Lowen and Jimmy Charlo. Q Hammond's also a senior, right? And then you had Bo Nicholas Paul, senior, who had 3 interceptions. You had the corners, Jabari Moore and Cam Jones, seniors. You also had Jackson Powell, a senior, who made some plays, who kind of was an unsung player on the defense, who stepped up at some pretty big times and made some pretty big plays for Army. Jackson Powell did. And, the youth, Caleb Fortner is part of the youth there with, Max DiDomenico. We'll get to Max in a second. Those guys are going to be the experienced players coming back along with Kyle Lewis. Kyle Lewis's first year starting as a nose tackle, maybe a little undersized there, but certainly held his own in a lot of those games and was a factor. I know they rotated nose tackles with him and Darius Richardson, but for the most part, Kyle Lewis took the bulk of the nose tackle snaps. And for a first year starter, I think he did a pretty good job there. So he'll be certainly a guy that they look forward to down the road. Biggest win of the year. Part of me at the start of this poll, you have 4 spots. I said, okay, our Air Force and Navy, and I was almost going to put UTSA and Coastal in there too, but I'm like, nah, we're just going to go straight up Air Force, Navy. What was the biggest win amongst Army fans? What did they think was the biggest win? And right now, I think the polls are just about closed. 57% said Air Force. So the Air Force was the bigger win over Navy, and we can talk about that. 17th ranked Air Force was undefeated at 8-0. It was Army's first win over an AP ranked opponent since 1972. So it was, and 23-3 in Denver, basically a home game for Air Force, right? So a performance that reminded us of that shutout effort, 21-0 effort in 17 by Army at Air Force. So I don't know how you guys feel about the biggest win of the year. You can go both ways in that. Just the way the Navy game ended was a pretty big, there was more drama in the Navy game than there was in the Air Force game. The Air Force game was a more dominant effort. and probably a more impressive effort, right? If you think about it, when you're going up against Air Force, and that spun them out of control. They lost their last 4 games of the regular season. They were able to win the bowl game to get to 9 wins. But how you guys see it, Brendan? How you see the biggest win of the year?
I would say it's definitely Air Force. That was one of the things when Jeff Monken signed his extension early in the season. I kind of listed a bunch of things of like sort of like achievements left that he could still accomplish at Army, and number one on the list was defeating an AP ranked opponent. I mean, the fact that not even like Jim Young accomplished that in his standout time as coaching it, I mean, streaks like that can be really weird when they go for that long. So some of it's luck, and some of it is just you're going up against better teams. But to finally get that monkey off the program's back, it's definitely the Air Force win. Not that it wasn't also fantastic to beat Navy. And, even though the Navy win was closer than a lot of us liked, I really did feel that Army was the better team on the season and on the day and throughout that 60 minutes.
Now that will go to Mike Fulowski real quick before we get Seth's opinion there. Air Force was the biggest win, changed the entire season. Big underdogs on the road. Air Force was not the same team after that loss. What was the line on that game, Seth? I forget.
Air Force was, I think, 11 or 12-point favorites, weren't they? Something.
Yeah,
it was
double
high.
digits plus. It was double digits plus. I thought it was even more than that. Yeah. What do you think about the?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, let's go back the week before Air Force. We had Army losing to UMass 21-14 at West Point, and up in the press box, everybody was sitting there saying, "Uh-oh, what's going to happen here?" We were all concerned. We, had the TV sets on. It was a national televised game, and Army came out and just took it to them, and it turned the whole season around. 4 wins in a row. They don't win that Air Force game. Who knows what happens? I mean, who knows? They could have been defeated, mentally defeated, and you had the Holy Cross the next week. That was a tough game. We won only 17-14. That Air Force game turned the season around and allowed Army to be 6-6. At the time, they were 2-6. Air Force was coming in. They were high flying. They were talking about going into a New Year's Day bowl game. At the time, they were the highest ranked non-Power 5 school, and they were all talking about playing on New Year's Day. Army changed that, and as Michael said, they were a different team afterwards. They didn't regroup until this bowl game where they beat a good James Madison team. So, and they finished 9-4. They were 8-0. They finished 9-4, and I think that's because of Army. So, the Navy game is always big. We all know that. We've been to enough Army Navy games to know that. But Air Force changed and saved the season.
Yeah, it was Army season to a point. I mean, Army season was on the line there, and they were able to get a win and kind of turn things around. And that gets to the last poll question I had is, what was the Army football play of the year in 2023? 1, the Caleb Fortner strip sack versus Navy. 2, the goal line stand versus Navy at the end of the game. 3, Bryson Daly's 62-yard touchdown run against Air Force. And 4, Max DiDomenico's interception against Navy. We'll get to the poll results, and then we'll get to maybe if you guys have some other opinions on what you thought the play of the year was. Caleb Fortner's strip sack won 46% to 43% on the goal line play from Army. Those things went up and down. I was watching the poll results during the night, and at one point it was like 47-43 goal line stand. So, I mean, those 2 plays were certainly big plays in that game. Individually, as far as I don't know if you're going to see many plays like that Caleb Fortner play when the linebacker comes in on a blitz, strips the quarterback, the ball bounces right into his hands, and he's gone for, a 40-yard strip sack score. So that probably would get my play of the year. When I think of play of the year, I also think of like unconventional stuff, right? I mean, things like you look at why does the Markel Johnson pass in the UTSA game come to my mind as one of the plays of the year? And you probably wouldn't think about it. It's week 3, right? But it was a big play in that game, and it kind of opened up things on the offense against UTSA in that game. That's my offbeat pick. I don't know, Brendan. Do you have any others, or do you agree with the Fortner as the number 1 play, or what's your take?
I mean, personally, I'd say the goal line stand, just because it's just so it's just like such a symbol of like the philosophy of Army, where it's like, everybody doing their 1/11th, as they say, to make the play. But I mean, the Fortner strip sack is outstanding, like outstanding individual effort.
What do you got, Seth?
Yeah, I agree with the strip sack. I think Navy had the momentum. I was worried. I think a lot of people were worried about Navy just taking over the momentum, and that strip sack put Army up. I think it was it 17-3 then? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. We need that cushion. But listen, I think all those plays were major plays, and including the UTSA play. So, I'm glad they all happened. Let's put it that way. We needed those things to happen for Army to win the game against Navy, and against Air Force. It was good play after good play for certainly the entire first half, and then holding on in the second half.
Yeah, Jim Zopoulos comes in saying Army started hitting versus Air Force versus just making tackles. They started forcing turnovers. And then he has a comment with hands like that, move Caleb Fortner to wide receiver. I think they're going to keep him on defense, to be honest with you, Jim. But we'll see. So I think they're pretty okay. I was thinking about this, right, real quick. I was thinking about, for some reason, in the middle of the day, okay, what's Army got coming back? We'll talk about the transfer portal stuff in a second. But at wide receiver, they're in pretty good shape, I think, with Casey Reynolds coming back, Noah Short coming back, Toby Alawale coming back, and they have a couple other young receivers. I was talking to Bo Nicholas Paul today. I'm going to try to put the audio on our YouTube channel once I break it down, transferring it from phone to computer and stuff like that. But he was saying the young receivers that he got to play against on scout team for Army this year got him prepared for games, and he's saying watch out for some of those young receivers. They have a couple of young guys like Toby Alawale that are going to be coming up. So if they stick with this gun option, which who knows, that'll be a off-season storyline on what direction they go with the offense. If they stick with something in between the flex bone and the gun option and throw a little bit, the features next year's looking pretty good with wide receivers. So I think, Jim, we'll keep Caleb Fortner at linebacker. Brendan, you agree or
no? Yeah, keep him where he is. But one thing we forgot to mention offensively, freshman center Brady Small. I think he started just about every game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge thing going into next season, where they're graduating quite a bit across the offensive line. But to have a young center with that much experience, I think that'll, and assuming Daly is coming back at QB, could be that could pay big dividends next year.
Yeah, Brady Small, he starts every game, right? And in my opinion, personally, he was Army's best offensive lineman, in my opinion. Now, I'm not grading. I'm not a coach watching every little play. I was charting plays for a while during the season, but in my opinion, he was the most consistent. I don't think he had really a terrible snap all year long. I don't remember a snap that wasn't in the quarterback's hands. I could be wrong. Now, he had a couple snap violations where he might have snapped the ball. I mean, moved the ball or whatever. They called him a couple times for that. But I don't know. I thought he was really solid this year. And, you're looking at the offensive line coming back. Lucas Scott, started, I think, from the second game on. He's a junior at guard. But then we'll see what happens. David Hoyt was a junior. He got some starts at left tackle. They try to mix guys in and out. it'd be interesting to see who may or may not be back as far as the upperclassmen. I don't know. I've heard some things where they might be trying. Who knows, man? You might be seeing some familiar faces back on the offensive line. We'll see. I'm trying to think of any other things you guys want to talk about. I want to say, I didn't put this to poll out, but who could be like a breakout player for next year that maybe wasn't, a top player this year? So for Army, do any guys come to mind as far as a breakout player for you for next
Well,
year?
I think Noah Short. I think they're going to use him more next year. I hope they use him more next year. So he gets my the breakout player award for the offense.
Yeah, Casey
Defensively,
Reynolds as well. Yeah,
Casey Reynolds, yes.
yeah, two solid wide receivers there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, no, on defense, it remains to be seen. Let's go back to the offensive line. That's going to be the most interesting area that Army has to rebuild next year, assuming that they don't get some of these guys to come back for a fifth or sixth year, whatever it might be. I'm hoping somebody comes up and breaks out there, because that's pretty important area. You need an offense. You need a good offensive line if you're going to run this, whatever offense you run, either the flex or the shotgun. You need a good offensive line, a talented offensive line. So we'll see. I wish these guys were coming back. I think they learned a lot as the season went on. But now you have to start over again with 2 or 3 new offensive linemen. Defensively, it could be anybody. They've done a good job over the years, the last few years, getting these kids to come up. They start out as freshmen and sophomore. We don't think much of them, and then they get to juniors and seniors, and we're like, wow, they're good. We've had that for the last few years.
I was gonna say maybe Tano Latuli, but he's gone. So he's in the transfer portal. So I'm gonna say Elo Madozi. I'm going to say Elo Madozi on the edge. I think that with Jackson Powell graduating, there'll be a spot for him to potentially win. He was a guy who had a sack in a game against, I want to say Delaware State. I could be wrong. But then he had that when they blocked the punt, he returned the punt block for a touchdown for 18 yards, I believe, in the game. So I'm going to go with Elo Madozi for the breakout player of the year. I think he's like 6'3", he's like 220 pounds. He's got a frame that you can add on. You could probably even play. You're definitely going to want to play him on passing downs, and I think he can become a force, a consistent force for Army. That's a guy who just popped into my head. I would say El Madozi. We have a comment here. Under center or gun option next season. Well, that's something that we talked about all season long. They went to the under center for Coastal Carolina, and it was a success. So Army fans are going to say, why don't you do a little bit more of that? We thought that they might do it against Navy. I thought they ran every play in the shotgun, but one of the Army fans who I know said they ran one play from under center against Navy. So I think they had 62 plays, 61 under center. So, what do you guys think? Throw it out there.
Yeah, I can't wait for April to see exactly. First, it'll be warmer. Second of all, to see exactly what's going to be happening in spring practice. My guess is they incorporate both somehow. I think Monken knows that he needs to do more. Having the first year under your belt, is crucial, and now he's going to fine tune it to include both, so you can keep the defenses on their toes and maybe on their heels, actually, not their toes, on their heels, and maybe do some more damage. But I definitely think he's coming back with the shotgun, but I hope and I think that they're going to incorporate much more under center. So who knows what you're going to get? Who knows what you're going to get play by play? That's my feeling on it. I hope that happens.
Jim Zappoulos says play both. Under center was a great changeup. What do you think, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can manage to do both, let's say at like an 8, because I don't necessarily think you can be 100% effective at both if you're doing both, but if you can be like 80% effective at both, doing both, then I think that's great. Certainly, we'll see with the recruiting,
Yeah.
how that affects things. But also, the Navy's in your conference now, so there's going to be a level of gamesmanship by having common opponents throughout the season like you've never seen before. And so I don't think the AAC would ever intentionally schedule Army Navy back to back with like a particular school, but there's only so much you can do with scheduling. So if somebody gets hit with that back to back, it'll be really interesting to see like kind of how one school game plans for the other being next on the schedule. I don't know. It makes things interesting for sure.
Yeah, Mike Fulowski saying incoming QB from Florida is an excellent passer. I think we are sticking with the gun. I think he's talking about Luke Knight, one of the freshman QBs from Florida. Freshman. There's also another freshman, Harrison Orr, coming in from Florida, who also, I mean, he's like 6'2", 210, maybe kind of a little bit more Bryson Daly type physical guy, maybe a passer too. So, I mean, you're going to have somebody step up in that number 2 spot behind Bryson Daly, because we'll talk about it now. That transfer portal was hot after the Army-Navy game. I mean, for Army, there was a lot going out, and we know nothing comes in the transfer portal. So we had Isaiah Alston was the big name, right, going out. And, the stuff with Isaiah being, this would have been his 4th year at West Point, Isaiah, and the fact that he was granted permission or allowed to enter the transfer portal. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on there that I really don't have 100% facts on. So I rather just not say anything about. What I'll just say is, Isaiah's gotten offers from Iowa State, Kansas, James Madison, UMass of all teams. He's getting some interest out there, so he will be playing somewhere else next year. But we don't know about Champ Harris or Larry Robinson, the freshman quarterbacks. They entered the transfer portal. We'll see what happens there. If there's an interest there and they leave, then Army's got to find a backup quarterback. I don't know if they have a freshman on the roster right now that they think high of, maybe Cale Helms, who starts to dress toward the end of the season. You still have Dwayne Coleman, a sophomore, going to be a junior on the roster too. So we'll see where they go. I mean, they have some prep school quarterbacks. I believe the quarterback's name is Ethan Washington. That was one of the top prep school quarterbacks. So we'll see if he comes in and maybe vies for some time. Be interesting. Be interesting. We said Tano Latuli also entered the transfer portal too. A freshman linebacker who I liked a lot. When he was on the field, he was always around the ball. And with the graduation of Leo Lowen and Cam Agora and some of those inside linebackers, I thought that maybe he fit and maybe he get some playing time next year more. But he's gotten some offers from some West Coast FBS schools, I believe. So, I mean, he's from California. It looks like he's probably going to be gone too. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on the transfer?
We got to get used to this. This is going to happen every year because of what's going on in college football right now. It's much bigger than the service academies. Service academies are the losers in this because they can't, as you said, nobody can come into the academies. They can just leave, and that's bad. But this is what college football is about right now. Look what happened with the various bowl games. You have so many players, top players at various schools. You got 40 bowl games, 42 bowl games, 80 something schools, and a lot of kids aren't playing because they're transferring. Coaches are leaving, kids are leaving. This is what college football and college sports it's about. You see it in basketball, you see it even in lacrosse and hockey. And I'm sure other sports. These kids are jumping around. Sometimes they need to because they're being told by their coaches that they're not going to play at the schools they're at, and they need to move on. And sometimes they see a better opportunity someplace else, closer to home, further away from home. Bigger league, get some exposure for the NFL. if they're that good. In the case of Army, if you leave the first 2 years, you kind of leave without any requirements. After that, I don't know how that works. With Austin, we'll find that out what that meant. But this is what college football is going to be about. I'm sure Jeff Monken realizes this, and he's got to prepare himself for it. And remember, a lot of these kids. What percentage of the kids leave the prep school and don't go to West Point? Of the football players, it's pretty high, isn't it?
I would say like 20% maybe, but they say they have 45 to 50 kids there at the prep. Probably at least 10 leave, 10 to 15, maybe somewhere around there. I would think
Right.
some don't gain entrance to the Army in general. Some, because some of them are going there for grades to get their grades up and test scores up so they can gain entrance to West Point. And some of them are not accepted to West Point and go elsewhere and play. So let's see what Jim Zopoulos has to say. The fact that Taj Washington declared for the draft and suited up for USC was a surprise. Yeah, it's crazy. Now, this is totally off topic, but Texas State, right? They have 51 transfers come in this year. Is that right? 51 transfer players come in?
Yeah, I saw something like that.
How about Colorado? What did Colorado have?
Texas State won games. Colorado won games at the beginning of the season, then
they fell apart.
Yeah,
but this is what's going on. And you got to remember, there's also agents involved. So some of these better players said, "Hey, let's get you to a different school where you can get more exposure." There's a lot going on in college.
NILs, right? I mean,
name, image, good.
likeness, right? That's something too that you can't get at West Point. So maybe these players. I mean, I don't know where that leads to. Who knows? I mean, you get a sponsorship, you get some money. Does said school in the Sun Belt say, "Hey, come transfer to our school. We'll get you $100,000 in cash"? I have no idea. I mean, you can't do that.
That's for the best players. But as I said, there's a lot going on, and who knows where college football is in 5 years? There's talk of forming a super conference of 64 teams that will be separate from everybody else. And Army, Navy, and Air Force, I don't think want to be included in that. Who knows what it's going to look like? It's changing quickly and dramatically, and as I said before, not in my opinion, not for the better.
We have the legendary coach Red Blake checking in on our on the podcast today. Welcome, Blake, Red. ST next year. Brendan, you have any idea what ST means?
I assume special teams, which was along with the defense, another standout unit this past season. Certainly in the kicking game. I mean, I think I don't think there was a missed extra point all season. And I think there were only like 3 missed field goals on the season, and one of them was in the Delaware State game where it was like, "Hey, go work out your leg. Like, let's just see if you can make this one." Like, it didn't even matter. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna have to find another kicker, and hopefully they can continue to work to get a little more out of their punting game, because that was much like 2022. That was very adventurous at times. But there was a comment a little bit back from Eric. If you do both gun and under center, can Thatcher still call the plays? I think he has an off season to learn. Like it's not something you can handle during the week, during 1 week during the season, or even during a bye week. But I think he's a bright football mind, and if he wants to, or if they rather want him to add that to his arsenal, I think he's a bright enough guy that he can handle it in the off season.
Yeah. Real quick.
I agree with that.
Real quick, with the coaching staff, right? I mean, with all the coaching moves across the country, right now, Army still has its staff intact. Nobody has left Monken's staff yet to take another job at maybe a Power 5 school yet. Maybe I just jinxed it. Who knows? But usually, they've had a lot of changeover over the last couple of years, right? Guys moving on to, quote, bigger programs, so to speak. So we'll see. We haven't seen that yet, anything like that yet. Special team, Quinn Moretsky. Let's mention Quinn's name. I mean, one of the best kickers in recent Army history, no doubt. Probably the best kicker in recent Army history. I can't remember, anybody better within the last 15 years in Army history. I could be wrong, but I can't remember anybody better than Quinn. Part of me thinks that Quinn has a chance if he wanted to give it a shot at the next level. Give it a shot at the next level. I don't know if we'll see. Just talking to there's going to be a pro day for Army, near the draft, probably late March. And I already know that Josh Lingenfelter is going to participate in it. Bo Nicholas Paul told me tonight he's going to be a part of that. I mean, I'm sure you'll have the seniors there. We'll see. I mean, Quinn Moretzky was impressive. He made clutch kicks, eight field goals in a row in Commander-in-Chief's CIC games. Man, when all the pressure's on you, he's making them. And toward the end, they weren't giving me shots. They were from 47 and change out. They were some pretty good boots. And Quinn Moretzky, we had talk about 2 pump blocks by the Army special teams with Jabril Williams and Elo Mendoza scooping that up. And then you had Jabril Williams scoring on one that was blocked by, I believe, Brett Jarena in the Coastal game. So, I mean, there's special teams getting to play. And, who's that big game boomer? Who's that guy on the X? Big game boomer gave Sean Saturnio the number 19 special teams coach in the country, Sean Saturnio, when they were in the top 10, right? Ranked in the top 10. But Big Boomer says number 19 for Sean Saturnio.
That guy's clickbait. I don't pay him any attention.
I think 2 points I want.
Oh, go ahead, Seth.
The 2 points I want to make. One, I think Quinn is probably the best place kicker we've had here since, I don't remember his name, but like 1972, 73. Army had a really good place kicker. I'm older than you guys, but I'm not kidding. It's probably,
what about Pat Malcolm? Was he any good? Was Pat Malcolm any good?
Pat Malcolm was good, yeah. But
what about Jay Parker?
I mean, come on, Seth.
This guy, I tell you, he's really good. I'm sorry.
We just lost like 10 viewers, Seth.
Sorry. I'm old. What can I do?
Who was the guy?
The 60s and 70s. But the other point I want to make is we haven't really talked about the lack of fumbles and how that benefited Army, especially the second half of the season, and also the penalties. Army did not get hit with as many penalties. The last couple of games they did, I think, but before that they went a streak of not having that many penalties, that many holding calls. I think that was a key to the Coastal Carolina game, as I recall. They got caught up with some holding early on in some key games, but some games they didn't. But they didn't have the turnovers, and I think, well, as Monken says all the time, turnovers are the key to winning. And I think in the second half of the season, you did not see that many Army turnovers.
Craig Stopa is another legendary Army kicker.
That's the guy I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Craig Stopa. That's the guy.
Craig Stopa did not kick in the 70s, did he?
Yes, he did. 73, I think.
Oh wow. Okay.
No, I thought he was a mid 80s guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to get my Army.
Don't
make me get my Army media guy out, Seth. Don't make me do it.
Okay, I'm getting it. I have it right here.
Hey, there it is. You can research that while we get to this question. Is Worley a candidate for Navy OC? Now, Navy did let go of its offensive coordinator after one season. Grant Chessman, was that his name? Am I correct?
Chestnut?
No, Chestnut. Great Chestnut. Yeah. Grant Chestnut. And, I think that Navy fans are calling for Ivan Jasper to get that job back. We'll see. Ivan Jasper's still on the staff. I don't know. If Cody Worley leaves for Navy, that's a blow, because Cody Worley's done a pretty good job with the Army quarterbacks, over the last couple of years, whether it be the quarterback shuffle, right, Brendan? Whether it be the quarterback shuffle, or just getting Bryson Daly in his first season to be, the basically the bell cow of the offense. And, that would be a big blow for Army to lose Cody Worley if that was. I haven't heard anything to that. So, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would be foolish not to interview him. But I mean, just looking at Navy the past few years, they don't seem very capable of making good decisions right now. I mean, it's just been a mess. I mean, Chet trying to fire Ivan Jasper And then and then it was like, oh no, he's not fired, and he's still there, but Ken's gone. I mean, nothing that they've done the past like 2-3 years has made any sense in terms of anybody having a vision for the program for everyone else to follow. It just doesn't make any sense. If I was a hot coaching candidate, I don't think I'd want to go there. Because
I will say this. Cody Worley, I thought should have got some consideration to be the Army offensive coordinator this year. They went outside the box. They went to Drew Thatcher. I think he certainly has the credentials to be an offensive coordinator at the FBS level, especially when you're operating a option type offense, no doubt. Look at the game he called against Coastal Carolina. That's enough said. That's enough tape to put out there to say, hey, I don't know, say a Kennesaw State who's moving up to the FBS level is looking for an offensive coordinator. That's where he originally came from before he coached at Army. The dude deserves a coordinator's job. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, he's good enough to be a coordinator, and so we'll see what happens with that.
Craig Stopper, you guys are right.
10 minutes later. He played in the early 80s.
The guy I was thinking about was Jim Barkley. So he played in the 70s. Boy. So, but Craig Stopper has the record for most field goals at Army, 48.
Nice.
Tried 68, made 48. Well, I want to make sure I get it right.
No, you know what? Maybe we'll do an Army football trivia podcast down the road, and you can host it. You know what I mean? But
1960s and 70s Army football trivia.
He's our Army football historian, guys. The Black Knight Nation Army football historian. His name is Seth Mendelson. Give him a follow. Oh wait, he's not on social media, guys. He might be on Facebook.
Yes, I am. I'm on Facebook.
If I may,
go ahead.
If I may comment on the whole transfer portal and all that.
Sure.
In some ways, this is nothing new. They pretty regularly have guys transfer out of the program, or who stay at the academy but leave the football team. There's always been and always will be a certain amount of attrition at the academy because of what the academy is and trying to play football on top of that. So I'm not necessarily concerned just because, I don't, Army goes after just a different sort of person to be a part of the program, especially now. I mean, when you hear Monken talk about recruiting, he's like, we're not going after like your run of the mill, high school standouts. We're really looking for people who people around them feel could, meet the challenge of being at the academy and playing football as well. So, I agree. Like, I'm not really happy with the overall direction of college football. I think, I don't know. I kind of wish there was like, a czar, at some level to just be like, hey, like, we gotta do better to make this work for everybody who wants to be involved. But, people are going to chase money. So
there should be a limit in how many, I don't know, whatever. Want to also in the transfer portal conversation, Calvin Crummy also entered the transfer portal too. He was the first to enter the transfer portal. He was a guy who was injured at the beginning of the season, made it back and played some special teams in the middle of the season, got on the field for the LSU game, and then decided that, he was going to enter the transfer portal. And Calvin Crummy was a guy who a year ago was right in the middle of that goal line stand against Navy, to help Army win that double overtime game. So Calvin Crummy could definitely could be a playmaker, and we wish all those guys the best at whatever decisions they decide. The guys that have entered the transfer portal, the guys who stay, and I look at like a guy, just talking to Bo Nicholas Paul earlier tonight, and just talking to Bo a little bit about how he didn't really get much of a chance to play until his junior year, and then his senior year was more snaps. But he said whatever time I got on the field, I wanted to make the most out of it. And I was trying to make a play every time I got on the field. And that's what you hope that you got those guys, because those are just kind of the glue guys. The guys like, I'll tell you, I'm going to miss, while we're doing this, I might as well say this, while we're doing this recap podcast, and then we'll go to a little bit about what we can expect and beyond. I'm going to miss guys like Bo Nicholas Paul and Ijon Marshall, because those guys were about the realest Army football players I've ever met. Maybe Steve Anderson's up there. I give our co-host Steve Anderson up there. Those are the guys that just told it like it is. They played with, they were all heart guys. They were all team guys. You look at Ijon Marshall, was getting scoring touchdowns as a slot back last year, gets moved to slot receiver this year, has a little bit of struggle at the beginning of the season. Toward the end, has a touchdown against Coastal Carolina. He's playing gunner on special teams his senior year when he was a main guy on the offense last year. And he's, doing whatever is best for the team. And just talking to those guys over their 4 years, I mean, like I said, that's guys we can really be proud of going into the Army and serving our country. Those guys they just as real as it gets. And that senior class was a pretty big senior class for Jeff Monken, because you had some 5-year guys in there. A lot of guys that are going to be missed, a lot of guys, but last year it was the same thing with Broughton and Carter and that class. And we said, well, how are they going to fill those roles? What are they going to do on defense? What's going to go on offense and that kind of stuff? And, 6-6 is average. It's a lot better than what it could have been, but next year, I mean, going to this AAC schedule, and Seth, you wrote it when the schedule came out. We don't know the dates yet. We don't know the order of. All we know is home and away opponents. But Army has a pretty favorable schedule in their first season in the AAC.
I just want to say one more thing. I'll get into that. It takes a special kid, whether it's male or female, to go to West Point, Annapolis, or the Air Force Academy. And it takes a really special kid to play football. You're playing against Division I teams. Academically, you have to be sound. You got to go to school. You got to go to do some military responsibilities. And, of course, you got to play football, which is a full-time job. So I've always been, as I've gotten to know the players through the last few years of working with you, Sal, I am so impressed with these kids, every one of them, and what they do and how they do it and how they compete. They're not the biggest kids on the field. The other team's usually bigger. Sometimes the other team's faster. Sometimes they're just better. But these kids give 100% all the time. So I just wanted to say that. And I am so impressed with the way they act during the game and after the game with us, and how polite they are and how they answer questions most of the time. And that goes to the coaches too. They're candid and forthright with us, and we ask a question, they answer it when they win and when they lose. So I'm impressed with that. Changing the subject to the AAC next year, I wrote the story about 3 weeks ago. Army got a great deal going into the league next year. Navy got a tough deal. So that's good for all the Army fans, and not so good for the Navy fans. What I mean by that is Army is not playing Memphis. They're not playing Tulane. Because there's 14 teams in the league. You play 8 league games, so obviously Navy game doesn't count, so it's 13. Of course, you can't play yourself. So you're playing 8 out of 12 teams for Army. So the 4 teams that they're not playing include Tulane, which has become a good program. They have their own stadium now. They seem to be recruiting very well. And Memphis has always done pretty well. And I think there's a third team that's pretty good. It's South Florida. There's a third team they're playing that's pretty good. Army is not playing a team in the league that had above 500 record this year. Going into the bowls. I don't know how I finished now. And that's a great welcome. Looks like we open up against Lehigh. We're not 100% sure of that. And then they go into the season against the league schedule. Somebody writes Army Notre Dame. We think that's happening.
Can they just announce that, Seth, so my report from 2021 can come to fruition, please? I mean,
we don't know why they haven't announced it yet. We know the game, if it's going to be played, it looks like some people played in Yankee Stadium to honor the Four Horsemen game. That game was actually played at the Polo Grounds, but the Yankee Stadium is as close as you can get. It's across the river, the East River, and you cannot play in Yankee Stadium. You cannot play a football game until after the baseball season is over. whether the Yankees make it or not, because they don't know whether the Yankees are going to, how far they're going to go. So to play in Yankee Stadium, it has to be sometime starting the second week of November. We understand. We think it's the weekend, if it is played, the weekend before Thanksgiving. Is that correct?
23rd is what I kind of came up with. I think
Yeah.
November 23rd. And real quick,
Which,
I had people reach out to me with messages. This is the Army Syracuse game, Mom. This was a couple days ago. I apologize for not getting back to people. I was just, like I said, dealing with a lot of personal and family stuff. And we found out through reports, which we knew already, Seth, Army and Syracuse are not playing next year. Maybe they're going to push those games down the road. Potentially, who knows? There were still 3 more games in that contract. I believe it was a 4-game series signed. So one was played at Syracuse this year, and there was supposed to be 2 at Mikey, 2 at Syracuse. So we'll see down the road if they play. It would make sense somewhere down the road for Army and Syracuse to play, right?
What I understand is that Army wants to play one division, FCS school every year, Lehigh, probably a Patriot League team. If they can, if they will. And then they want to play one Eastern Division I school, FBS school. And Army Syracuse makes sense. BC, Rutgers, Pitt, one of those schools. But Army Syracuse makes sense. And they probably are trying to push that down the road a little bit. I mean, they're not going to play Notre Dame every year, so that opens up the one game. You only have 4 non-league games, and Navy and Air Force are 2 of them, and then the one FCS team. They don't want to play 2 FCS teams because of, it doesn't count towards bowl standings. And I think the AAC has a regulation that you cannot play 2 FCS teams because they have to fill their bowl games.
Yeah.
So
hey, Eric's got all the scoops. Eric's got all the scoops. I think he's like Army Air Force to Giant Stadium ? I mean,
that's a possibility. It's the stadium is going to be 8,000 seats will not be usable next year as they rebuild the East Stands. So there is talk of moving the game either to the Meadowlands, MetLife Stadium, or Yankee Stadium. Or, I don't know where else they would go besides those 2 places. But then again, they may also sit there and say, let's just play the game at Mikey and hold, we'll get about 30,000. We'll put some temporary stands up. They'll get 32,000.
Yeah.
Who knows? We'll find out soon. I imagine the schedules will be coming out in the 2nd or 3rd week of January. And we'll find out what's going on, including the Notre Dame game, if there is a Notre Dame game.
Air Force, I think, released their schedule today or yesterday, and they, the usual spot on that. I don't think they put the site. They probably just put. Yeah. I saw on their graphic it was just at Army. It wasn't like, with an asterisk neutral site game. So they're gonna wait for probably Army to announce that or do a joint. Well, that's Army's announcement since it's Army's home game. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, sooner or later, we're going to hear something about it. So
here's something interesting. Next year, Army's going to have 6 home games. Whether they play all at Mikey or not, we don't know. But you have the 4 league games. You have supposedly Lehigh, and there has been talk of Lehigh wanting to back out of that, but I don't know if that's true or not. But and then Air Force. So you have 6 games. Plus you have the Navy game in Washington, not that far away, and the Notre Dame game in Yankee Stadium, if that happens. And I think Temple's an away game. So Army will have 9 games played between Mikey Stadium and then, of course, as far south as Washington. So out of 12 games, 9 of them will be in driving distance for any West Point fan who lives in the Northeast.
Seth's ready to drive those games. So that.
But they
I'll be at every game, I promise. If I'm here, I'm going.
But they do make trips to Texas and Florida, which is good for recruiting.
I think the Florida Atlantic, right? Florida Atlantic?
Yeah.
Is that
yeah.
That's an interesting team. They had a bowl game, the Boca Raton Bowl. And it's an interesting team. They really try to make a name for themselves down there. They did in basketball, and now they're trying to do it in football.
Do they? Do they really try to make a name for themselves?
In basketball, they are, and they're trying in football. I mean, hey, listen, somebody's going to win this league.
They hired. Oh man, oh God, I can't remember his name now. But he was like the son of a pro coach. I don't know. He was there for like a cup of coffee, trying to give that program some notoriety.
Yeah, the Owls of Florida Atlantic. AJ asking, do we think the Army offense will go to the new offense or under center? We answered that earlier, AJ. We think that it could be a little bit of a combination of both. Coach Monken said maybe even in the Navy post game, right? He was saying they might have to look into a little bit more of incorporating both of the offenses in the off season. There we go. We got AJ. Guys, if you have any other questions for us, we're gonna talk about the 2024 season on a personnel level real quick, and then we're gonna get out of here. But if you got any questions, we'll post them up and we'll try to answer them. We pretty much kind of, when we went through our offense and defense, kind of got a feeling about what Army has back for next year. We talked about the schedule a little bit. Next year has to be a bowl year for Army, right? I mean, it just has to be. I mean, 2 6-6 seasons. I mean, seasons where, there were some struggles. This year, 5-game losing streak, 4-game winning streak to end the season. You go into the offseason feeling pretty good about yourself. The Commander-in-Chief's trophies back at West Point. We didn't really talk about that too much. That is one of the main goals of the program. You got that in the case and outside the football office. You're going to have that as motivation to keep that. It's got to be a bowl year, no doubt, for the Black Knights. They have the offensive pieces, right, with Bryson Daly coming back, with Kanye Udo, with the receivers coming back, led by Noah Short and Casey Reynolds. Tight end, we'll see what they do at tight end. Got some younger players coming back there. The offensive line's they're gonna need some guys to step up. A guy who was injured this year and did not play, who started last year, Will Jeffcoat on the offensive line. He would have been a junior this year, and he got some starts as a sophomore on the offensive line. So if he can come back from injury, he could be a guy that they might that might be a guy that kind of, some guys like that Will Jeffcoat did start games last year for Army, and he could be back. It would be his senior year, and that would be a good boost to the offensive line. I know they were having a battle between Brady Small and Bill Katsagiannis, and I think Katsagiannis played a little guard in some of the games. So there's some guys who have some game experience, but let's see what they do at those tackles. The interior should be pretty good. AJ, you don't have to apologize, man. Sorry you just tuned in now. We appreciate you checking us out.
Yeah, we appreciate you tuning in whatsoever.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, AJ? Fire them away.
The AAC has, I believe, is it 6, 7, or 8 bowl games that they're signed up for. So out of 14 teams, half your teams, if they finish 6-6 with only one FCS victory or team, whatever, they should be able to. Army has a solid shot at going to a bowl game, and let's be honest, Army plays 2 bowl games every year, Air Force and Navy. So this will be a 3rd bowl game if they can do it. And I think they got a great schedule. I think there's a lot back. I think what Monken did this year, he tried. And I respect it. And I think he's going to come up with some good ideas for over the winter. I'm sure they're working on it right now. I wouldn't be surprised if some kind of new offensive twist comes up. And they do something we don't even know about yet. What's this? What's the real timeline for Mike? 2026.
Is that what it is? Yeah, I think 2 years. Yeah,
2 years.
Man, that's a long time from now.
It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be weird.
They did say they will have some temporary seats. I think mostly for the 25 season, so they'll be able to incorporate some seats in there somehow. But it's a 2-year. I think they get going in a couple of weeks, right? In January, they'll get going on it.
I thought they said the spring.
Yeah,
because don't you have to play these little cross games there?
They can do it around it. They can still run it. I was talking to Joe Alberici, the cross coach, and everybody will just be on the other side, on the home team side. It shouldn't affect the field at all, at least not much. It can't affect the field at all. But it looks like it's going to be It looks like it's going to be the 26th season, and it's going to be beautiful. They raised $170 million, all private funds. This is not the government's not putting anything into this. $170 million. That's pretty impressive.
I'm telling you, after that Coastal Carolina home game and knowing some people whose families have had seats there for 40 years on that in those East stands, it was a pretty sad, like emotional day for that. Now they're going to be moved, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Once I want to see the shovel in the ground first, to be honest with you, Seth. Let's see the first shovel in the ground. Let's see some stands being knocked down. Let's see something going there. Hopefully we'll see it by the spring. AJ saying we talked about this a little bit with the neutral site game for Army Air Force. I mean, that is the one game that would probably sell out on Army schedule for the 2024 home schedule. So, I mean, can you move it? If you move it to, like, say, MetLife, is that game going to draw 50,000 fans? I mean,
it did in Denver, so and I know a lot of like class reunions and stuff. Like, rather than trying to go to Mikey or even Army Navy this past season, they went out to Denver for their class reunions. So I could see that being a ticket sale boon. Obviously, like, I mean, I don't think they would sell out MetLife, but if you sell out the lower bowl, 50,000, whatever, I think that's a good deal.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't think you can play that game really at Mikey Stadium with construction going on. I don't think you can. I mean, so they're going to find a place to play. And like Seth said, if you're going to play the Notre Dame game at Yankee Stadium, you're definitely not going to play twice at Yankee Stadium in a month. So the next biggest venue is. I don't think you're going to play that game somewhere where Army can't have at least a little bit of advantage in travel. You're not going to play at Lincoln Financial Field. You're not going to. You're going to play that probably MetLife, and we'll have to check out the schedules for, see what happens. I mean, that would be the first Saturday in November, so hopefully we'll see that. Yeah. Let's see. I'm
just thinking.
Oh no, Mike! Hold on, Seth. Mike Fulowski. Mike, you're one of our most dedicated followers to this podcast, but make it a primetime game at Jerry's house.
How did those games draw? Sal, you went. Did you go to one of them, or how did the two games at the baseball stadium?
Oh, I did not go. I did not go to those. They did not draw well. They were like in the 30s, low 30s at the most, I think. So
yeah, I don't think they made much of it. Whoever sponsored that, somebody sponsors that. I don't think they made a lot of money. They expected more because Texas being a big military
take this
state.
Question away, will you? Since you're a season ticket holder, take this.
Okay. You got to be a season ticket. You got to negotiate with them. You got to call them up and say where you want your seats, and hope that this is a tough year because of the construction if it happens. But I will say this: don't be in the end zone, and don't be the first four rows anywhere in the stadium. So, but try to negotiate with them. The sections 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 are good seats. But I would call the ticket office up and say, I'm buying tickets. I want good seats. Just don't settle for that. That's my suggestion. Jimmy Charlo's dad just said, Seth, what'd I say?
1 second. Here we go. I'm getting to the comments. Mike, we'll let you slide with the Jerry's World suggestion. Seth, how's the CIC not the topic of this podcast when they were left for dead at 2-6 by some of you?
Well, it's nice that they got it.
I never left them for dead. So, I'm just going to assume that's not directed at me.
This might be my favorite comment of the whole year. Just Seth in capital letters. That's great, man. I think I got to screenshot that.
I'm up in Ringwood all the time. You got to like me, Jim. Come on. I'm in your hometown visiting all the time. I have friends up there. Listen, I was surprised. I was surprised that they were an 18-point dog going into that game, into the Air Force game. I had no doubt Army could beat Navy, but Air Force, 18-point dog. I wasn't the only one who thought they weren't going to win, and I'm happy as can be that they won. And your son had a great year. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we still have a lot of people viewing this podcast. People turning in comments and stuff like that. I mean, we pretty much have hit a lot of this.
I mean,
Anything else? Go ahead,
Sal,
Brendan.
I don't think anybody on this podcast was ever calling for coaches' heads at any point during the season. And I know there was some of that going on social media, but it was not coming from us.
Yeah, I mean,
Not at all.
Transition to the offense, I will admit it was really rough. I mean, 159 minutes without an offensive score was rough to go through. And I mean, there were some times that Air Force game, they pulled it out, and you have to give, and we said this before, you have to give the leadership on this team, the leadership amongst the senior class and down throughout a lot of credit, because they could have certainly packed the season in, no doubt. You lost 5 in a row, you're 2-6, you're playing a really good Air Force team, but they certainly brought their best, and Air Force did not bring their best, and Air Force got smacked. And that's one of the better if you could gonna rank it, Jeff Monken wins in his 10 years at Army, right? That's probably top 5. That's probably a top 5 win of Jeff Monken's in his 10 years. I mean, we can go through and rank them and that kind of stuff. But
that was a major upset. That was a major upset, and they dominated them the whole time. Jim, I'd like to add one more point. I interviewed your son a number of times, and you did a great job raising him. He's a class act, and I wish him the best going forward. The same to you.
Yeah, real quick, I just got a text message from an Army fan saying that if they do play the neutral site game, Air Force away from West Point, the last Army Air Force game at Michie Stadium was 2018, and they wouldn't play again until 2026. So that's an 8-year period where Air Force does not play at Michie Stadium. So we'll see. I mean, maybe things will change. Maybe maybe they won't go the neutral site route. It makes most sense to go the neutral site route.
They played in 2020. Didn't they play 2020?
They played it at. You're right. They did play.
Yeah, 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, but without fans.
Without fans. Yeah.
Without fans.
Yeah.
So let me put the asterisk with fans. Real quick, that home schedule, right, Seth? Who are the AAC teams? Nobody that's gonna.
I got it pulled up.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So at home, it's UAB, East Carolina, Rice, and UTSA.
Okay, UTSA is the tough team on that schedule at home, and they're the toughest of the 4. They're by far the tough. They're going to be, they're always going to be good. They recruit pretty well down there.
But Frank Harris finally won't be there.
Yes, he won't. So I mean, after 8 years or 10 years, he finally is moving on. Give me the away schedule. So our away schedule is Temple, Florida Atlantic,
North Texas, and Tulsa.
All right, well, Tulsa was at the bottom. Florida Atlantic is struggling. I think they were, they were a sub 500 team. North Texas is always a tough game for Army. They match up tough.
That home schedule is what it is. That's the AAC. That's what you get. You're in the conference. That's what you get. So
I mean, if you take out SMU and insert Army in terms of like the overall ratings, Army's basically a top 5 team in the American this season. Like there were just not a lot of good teams there this past year.
Yeah, it's a transition, right? Because Cincinnati and Central Florida go to the Big 12, and there's some movement going on there. And now
SMU to the Atlanta ACC,
and now you're like you got the Charlottes of the world coming in, and we'll see. And you got Army.
AJ asked us about, do we like the conference? I don't think they had a choice. With the way college football is going, they had to do it because it's all about money, and they had to try to get as much money as they can and get into a league and get teams that they can play. It's all changing very quickly, and I think that the athletic director did a good job of getting them into this conference. I think it's the best conference for Army to go to. If they're going into a conference, it makes the most sense. And you have a couple of teams in the East. You have Temple and Navy, and East Carolina is not that far away. There's some rivalries going on there. So yeah,
Real
no
quick,
choice.
real quick, what's going on with Florida State in the college football landscape? And if they were to jump the ACC and the ACC falls apart, and you end up with Syracuse and Boston College and those kind of schools looking for places to play and have a conference. My opinion at the beginning was maybe Army jumped the gun a little bit on this conference and going to the conference a little bit. What was the hurry to join the conference? AAC needed one team. The AAC targeted Army. They wanted Army, Navy in the same conference. And I thought they could have waited. There was no really hurry for this. And now what if the college football landscape blows up again? I guess if you're looking at it from an Army standpoint, they're going to say this is where we can be the most competitive in this conference, right? We talked about the AAC. They could be a top 5 team potentially next year in the AAC. Could they be a top team when you're going to have a conference that includes Syracuse and Boston College every year? Who knows? Who knows? And who knows who else would be in that mystery conference if those teams get left out. The Wake Forests of the world, if they get left out, who knows? But those are teams that Army's played in the recent past. Do we think it'll help recruiting? I don't know. I mean, yes and no. Yes and no, maybe. But now you're going head to head with more. Like when you're recruiting, right? When you're going down to Texas, you're basically, and you're recruiting right now in Army's big landscape. Air Force and Navy are the main teams you're recruiting against, right? And I see if Army offers 600 kids in the 2024 class, more than 50% Air Force offers out of those 600, and about the same with Navy. They're going after the same pool. Now you're going into Texas trying to recruit a kid, and now they have Rice, right? They have Rice in the conference. They have North Texas in the conference. So you're going to
UTSA also.
Yeah, UTSA. You're going to Florida. You have South Florida and Florida Atlantic in this conference. Now you have to go in maybe a battle or two with those schools. I'm not saying every kid you get out of Florida has an offer from South Florida. Every kid you get out of, Texas has an offer from North Texas. Some do. So, and some kids actually, one guy who originally committed to Army, Trey Moore, I think he played for UTSA. He played at prep or committed to Army, went to UTSA, had a good career, and now he's maybe at like an Oklahoma type now for his last year of college. So, I mean, it's recruiting such a crapshoot, it really is. And they're going for, like you said, they're going for certain kids, certain build and DNA in kids, and we'll see. One more for AJ. Being in a conference and possibly that's far-fetched a little bit. I think the playoff spot, the New Year's 6 bowl or whatever, you got to win the conference, and we'll see. Is Army going to be in the conference championship game next year? Seth?
Maybe. Who knows?
It could happen. It could happen.
Well, they got a lot.
8 games. I put them going into the conference next year. What I know, I see in the conference games. I say 6-2 of the 8 games. I see them going 6-2. That could end up being 4-4. Could end up being 8-0. We don't know. This is what the coaches do. And then of course you have the tough games. Air Force, Navy, and Notre Dame is a different league. And if it is Lehigh, if it is Notre Dame, but one team from the group of 5 is going to make that top 12, that playoff next year. It's guaranteed. Okay. And it could be the AAC and the Mountain West are probably the 2 best conferences of the group of 5. So you got to figure that, at least it's something we can talk about during the year. It gives us something to another goal. It's a long shot, and you got to play Alabama in the first round. That's not true. You play the 5th seed, so you play. Maybe it would be Alabama in the first round at Alabama.
Oh my God,
that's a little scary.
Please, whatever bowl Army would have gone to, you can't replicate winning the CIC in the Army Navy game. Well said, James Charlo Sr. Real quick, want to mention a couple guys that I didn't get a chance to mention as far as returning guys coming back. Jack Latour, he played pretty well as a defensive end for Army when he was in the game. He's only a sophomore, so he'll be back on the defensive line. I'm thinking, man, they got a lot to replace, right? Well, they have some guys who have seen some action. And the guy I want to mention is maybe he can get back into the quarterback mix is Zach Mundell. He was a quarterback. They moved him to wide receiver at the end of last year. He's coming back from injury, a hamstring injury at the beginning of this year. They kind of moved him to slot receiver. Maybe he goes back to quarterback for a little bit, at least in spring, see what's all about, and maybe that might be a guy that can also compete behind Bryson Daly. Just was going through their roster real quick, wanted to get those out there. AJ's firing them away. I know you guys talked about the defense before. Who do you think would be a good replacement for Lowen? Brett Arena?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I would say. Yeah,
Brett Arena. As far as the inside guys, Adam Cash is a guy who will be back on the inside. Who am I missing? There's another guy in there that saw some action too. It hurts when you lose guys like Calvin Crumby and Tano Latuli to the transfer portal. Those are guys who would be next up, so to speak, to replace Lowen. So let's see. Yeah, Brett Jarena, Mike Fulowski says. So, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, but who is going to replace well, we kind of knew who was going to be the next safety up for Army when Marquell graduated, right? It was Max DiDomenico, and he definitely stepped up this year and made some big plays. So now they got to have another guy replace Q Hammonds, and Casey Larkin has some experience, right? Casey Larkin saw some experience back there. My question will be on the defense cornerback, because their top three guys have graduated, so what they do at cornerback. Donovan Platt came back for a stint during the year, but I think he was banged up again. He's a guy that should be back and should be a starter for Army next year. Who will play opposite him? We don't know. They're really high on the freshman corner, Steve Nadozi. We'll see how that plays out. Who knows? There could be a freshman corner from the prep school or the recruiting class coming in. So we'll be on for a couple more minutes. These numbers are excellent. Seth, I have to give you a thumbs up for putting this on that Facebook page. It probably got our views up. And guys, if you're watching this right now, check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe on our YouTube channel. We're up over 800 subscribers right now. Man, if we can make it to 1,000 sometime before 2030, that would be great. So we give you guys pretty good content. I was pretty close to getting a long-time Army player for a podcast this week. Didn't happen, but we're going to try to get some former players on before. We got a lot of space to cover between now and the spring, right? So we're going to try to get on, maybe do some topic stuff. Maybe we'll do some Seth Mendelson trivia and, go from there. Let's see. He's got a couple more questions here, AJ. What's crazy is I want to know who's going to be on the offensive line replacements. And we kind of talked about that a little bit. They're really going to need two guys, maybe. Well, if you consider David Hoyt being a returning guy, David Hoyt, Lucas Scott, and Brady Small return. So that's probably two other guys. And I said maybe Will Jeffcoat if he comes back from injury at a guard. And that tackle's going to probably be wide open. That tackle's going to be probably, who knows, maybe it's a converted tight end. I don't know. Maybe it's somebody that we could be a freshman that really makes. There's a freshman, Paulo Generali. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his last name incorrectly, but he's a guy who's a big weight room guy, and maybe he's a guy who gets into the mix at tackle for next year. You also got Tanner Bivens, who also was a second string guy at guard. He'll be back next year. So I mean, there's guys out there that have had some game experience, but not as much as the guys who were graduating, like Connor Finucane. I think Booby Law is back for another year. I think. Finucane, Jackson, Filipowicz, Sam Barzak, and those guys.
I'm looking at Paulo Generali. He weighs 296 as a freshman. So by the time this kid graduates, he's going to be at 310. And he's a big kid. Let's hope he can he can play the position too.
Yeah, here with the only returner is Brady Small. Lucas Scott started most of the year. He's only a junior, so he'll be back. And Hoyt started about half of the games. He'll be back. And David Hoyt played pretty well at times, when he was in there. I think he got a little banged up. He was pretty good. So it's finding another tackle and, maybe Tanner Bivens or Jeff Coat or the other guard. And who knows? I think that Matt Drinkle and Mike Vitti, that offensive line got better as the season went on. And see if they can build off that with the younger guys. They have a good culture. I'm assuming some of the guys that are graduating will, at least one of those guys is going to be kept on as an AI, an athletic intern. And so that culture will still be in the room. Shane Buckingham's another guy who will graduate and who had a lot of experience. So, and he was a converted tight end. So you just never know. One more thing we got.
Here's a question. Here's a good question, Sal, about Champ Harris. What do you think?
I don't have the answer, man. I don't have the answer. Some people, I didn't really talk to Champ. Of course, I didn't. I was going to try to reach out to his dad. Didn't get the opportunity to do that. I don't know. Maybe an opportunity somewhere else. That's all I'm saying. Because that next year you're going to compete with Bryson Daly. I mean, you're not guaranteed starting. The Army's not saying you're starting your sophomore year at quarterback, right? Because you have a returning starter. So maybe there's somewhere else where he feels like he can play quicker at Army. Maybe. I mean, Champ Harris. Just talking to Champ Harris, he's a very smart kid. He's a very smart kid. So I don't think it was West Point. I think it was he wanted an opportunity to play maybe closer to home. Florida kid, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Good question, but do you think Lowen Fanukin can have next level experience?
I don't think they're quite there.
I know that Fanukin was getting looks. And I know that Lingenfelter was getting looks by scouts. Scouts were coming up to see those two guys. Now, I know that scouts also liked Isaiah Austin a lot. But Isaiah Austin wasn't going to be draft eligible this year coming up. They thought that Isaiah Austin had the most next level talent on Army. So now he'll be doing that somewhere else next year and then maybe getting a chance to play going directly to the pros. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Isaiah Austin's not at – I know there's other things going on there, but maybe that's another reason why, because after this year, you can't go directly to get a shot. After
this year, they can go this year too?
This year you can. After this year, okay. And who knows? Things are going to change. Once a new president gets in, things are going to change again. And the guy from Wisconsin is going to get heat from it. Talking to Ryan McCarthy on this podcast earlier this year, he says every December it could change. Every December they get together in the summer. They talk about it in December. I mean, it could change. So who knows? Who knows what we'll see next year? But who knows if that was a reason? I would give them a shot in a rookie minicamp, to be honest with you. Is any Army player going to get drafted this year? No, in my opinion. But I think a bunch of guys will get their shots. A guy, if he wants a shot to go after it, is Charlo too. Charlo could get at least a rookie minicamp invite, potentially, depending on a pro day and that kind of stuff. And Lowen could if he wants to. Lowen's 3.91 grade point average at West Point. Does he want to play football at the next level? Maybe he does. Bo Nicholas Paul told me he wants to try. And it's not just the NFL anymore. Is the USFL still in existence? I think so. Or did they
merged? I think they merged.
Yeah,
the two of them merged together.
Yeah, there was a USFL XFL merger. So
yeah, that's options now, right? Scott Flanick, former long snapper of Army, is playing in the I think he played in the USFL. So that's an option. That's professional football. So those guys can give it a shot. And why not? I mean, you still got the core guys in the NFL with John Radigan, Elijah Riley, Cole Christensen, Brett Toth. You still got those guys in the NFL. Andre Carter. How can I forget Andre Carter?
So,
yeah. I mean, Andre Carter getting into some action on special teams this year as a rookie. I mean, I expect Andre Carter to line up and go sack the quarterback, double-digit times this year, but it's probably a good developmental year for him. So, man, our numbers are crazy still. We're at our highest total right now with people coming on. Part of me wants to say let's call it a night, but part of me wants to say let's just keep on talking Army football. So, I mean,
well, to address AJ's question about the congressman from Wisconsin, we're all kind of scratching our heads. We understand why he's doing it. He thinks that if you go to the service academies, they're paying for you for 4 years, that you should go to the military. And I think our argument has always been this is great PR for all the academies. If you can go to the NFL and be a star player. Roger Staubach, of course, is the best example at Navy. And so, I mean, this is what we think. But you're right. If there's a new president in 25, we know that Donald Trump was a big fan of the sports, the various academy sports. He might sit there and try to push it back. But who knows? But they definitely got that law passed last year, and I thought it was last year it ended, but apparently it's this year.
No, grandfather. They were grandfathered.
Yeah, they're grandfathered in.
I think mainly. I think mainly that guy was just trying to, get some eyeballs on himself. But I mean I agree with Seth. I think it's foolish to prevent, especially because it's such a narrow thing, and there's all of these other, like world class athlete programs, Rhodes scholarships. Like there's all these other exceptions where people don't go directly to serving out their contract, and to limit this one in particular, where like there's basically no monoculture left there, but there's no bigger generator of eyeballs left in America than NFL Sundays and just generally people watching NFL games. So to just say no to that, just from a quote unquote basic advertising standpoint, is foolish. Well, I mean, you can't buy it, or I mean, you can, but you're going to pay for it. It just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, it reminds me of a certain other member of the Senate complaining that, every so often the troops get a lobster meal. And it's like, you ever heard of morale, dude? Like, have you ever heard of morale for the troops? Like,
it's funny. Not funny, but, last year, I believe this came out about Army Navy Week when this went down. And I'm surprised this year passed and there was nothing. You heard nothing about this year. AJ, if you want to find out a lot of information about that, just type in Ryan McCarthy Black Knight Nation on a YouTube search, and his most recent interview that he did with us this year will give you a ton of information on that. It was great to have Ryan McCarthy, former Secretary of the Army, on our podcast for the second time, and it was a very informational podcast, and I don't think things have changed. I hope we can get Ryan back on when this becomes a topic again, because he's he's a supporter of it, to get the kids getting a chance. He signed off on the Elijah Rileys. He signed off on the Cole Christensens. He signed off on the Connor Slomkas when Connor Slomka got a chance to be in a rookie mini camp. So I mean, it'd be good to follow. We'll see what happens. I look at just to. We're just talking Army, but this also involves Air Force and Navy. And Trey Taylor, I mean, he was the Jim Thorpe Award winner, right, for Air Force. I'm assuming that he probably has a chance to play at the next level, I'm assuming. So it's not just Army football players, it's Navy and Air Force players, too, that are involved in this. Let's see. I watched a podcast. Did Ryan McCarthy contact the congressman? I have to feel – I don't think directly. I think through connections. I think that he knew somebody in Congress who knew that congressman from Wisconsin, and man, it's an hour and a half plus.
Yeah. I gotta jump off, but I'll tease this. So if the Notre Dame game for this season becomes official, that'll be the most common opponents in a season that there's ever been between Army and Navy.
Right, yeah.
You've already got in conference East Carolina, Rice, Temple, UAB plus Air Force, and if it's Notre Dame, that's 6, and then obviously they play each other. So that's just like that's a lot of shared tape next season. But if they're in the same conference, this is the new normal. So
Very true.
It's truly a new era in Service Academy football.
Very true. We thank
Very
everybody
true.
for joining
That's
us
interesting.
tonight. Seth, we're going to
Let me
wrap
give
it
my
up.
tease. Let me give my tease. Army Lacrosse starts in the end of January. We'll be covering that, and they're going to be good. They're going to be a top 10 team. A lot of kids back.
Oh yeah,
So,
I'm super excited for both the men's and the women's, but the men's in particular.
and the women too are going to be much. Women are going to be much better. The men are going to be. They lost only their very good goalie, all conference goalie, and one other kid, a defenseman. But they have a lot of kids back. They're young, they're hungry, and they play a top schedule. Syracuse, North Carolina, the Patriot League, somebody else real good in there. Rutgers, very good team. UMass, and then they play a very tough schedule in the Patriot League, and that starts, I think, the first week of February, and we'll be covering that.
Seth, where are you going to be next Saturday?
I'll be up at West Point for a college basketball game. 1:00 start, right? Holy Cross.
The Army Black Knights men's, yes.
First Patriot League game against
there we go.
Against Holy Cross.
We'll try to get you guys covered with the other sports now that football season's over, but we appreciate your time. This has been the most viewed podcast we've done in a while. We thank everybody for joining. Check out BlackKnightNation.com for coverage, recruiting coverage, Bo Nicholas Paul story. Check out our YouTube channel for podcasts like this, interviews with players, current players, past players, coaches, and everything like that. Check out our Facebook page. Check out our Black Knight Nation Instagram. We have some stuff up there too. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Happy
Brendan,
New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Beat 'em.
See you, everybody. Thanks a lot.